Welcome to Ground Control. I received this kit. It's a Yak54 Aerobat 3D plane. It's made out of EPP foam. The foam is 10mm thick foam. I received this courtesy of Banggood. I want to thank Banggood for sending this 3D plane. As I stated, it comes as a kit, so you have to assemble it. This is review part 1, assembly part 1 of this plane. I'm going to do the assembly in two different parts because it's pretty lengthy and I go into quite a bit of detail and depth on the assembly of this plane. It does not come with any assembly documentation. Also, on Banggood's site it has this plane listed as a 650mm wingspan plane. That is incorrect. This is actually an 800mm wingspan plane, which is 32 inches. So it's a nice size beginner trainer 3D plane. So let's go ahead and get started on the assembly, video number 1, and then I will post the review part 2, assembly part 2 of this plane, where we'll finish up the assembly on it and get it ready for its maiden flight. It comes with everything to build the airframe. It doesn't come with any of the electronics, but it comes with control rods, and it comes with control rod supports. It comes with control horns, linkage stops, Velcro, landing gear. It does not come with any glue, so you need a foam safe glue to assemble this. And then if the maiden flight is successful, I'll create another video of tips, and also I'll go over all the electronics that I used to finish the build on this plane. So let's get started on the assembly.
The first thing I want you to do is take a look at your mating surfaces for your wing and also for your fuselage, and make sure there's no nubs of foam or anything that are going to prevent your mating surfaces from fitting together nice and flush. Now, when I inspected the fuselage where the wing attaches, there were some little foam nubs along one of the edges, so just take your utility knife and removed any of those jagged areas, so that, and then dry fit your surfaces together, make sure they're all going to fit nice and snug. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is attach the main wing to the fuselage plate. I'm going to do this one wing at a time and give one wing a little bit of time to set up before I do the other wing. Otherwise you're going to have a mess of glue all over the place. Make sure that you have some wax paper to put underneath the mating surfaces, and I've got everything facing on the top, because if there's any glue coming out, I don't want it to be on the top. I would rather it be on the bottom if some glue pushes out during the curing process. I would also suggest getting some pieces of packing tape. I don't think that I would put packing tape over the painted surfaces, because sometimes even packing tape can remove some of the paint. Depending on how well the paint adheres to the foam, it can peel off. So right here on these surfaces where there is no paint is where I'm going to attach little pieces of packing tape in order to keep these mating surfaces nice and snug together while the foam cures up. After this is cured up for about an hour, I'm going to repeat the process with the other half of the main wing, and then we'll go on to the next step. So let's go ahead and get our glue out. Don't need the utility knife anymore. And you want to use this, you want to apply your glue sparingly. As you force these two surfaces together, this glue is going to spread out. Now, this works like a contact glue. So what I want to do is put glue on one surface. You could put it on both surfaces if you want to apply it, a lesser amount, but I'm going to put it on one surface on the wing here. And then I'm going to join these two surfaces together, and then I'm going to pull them apart for about 10 seconds to allow the alcohol in the glue to evaporate, and that's going to make for a better joint. So right now I'm just going to separate it a little bit, wait about 10 seconds for the solvent to evaporate, and then I'm going to join them back together. And then I'm going to take a scrap piece of foam, and I'm going to scrape away any excess glue from the top of those mating surfaces. And then I'm going to take my packing tape, or painter's tape, excuse me, and I am going to hold these surfaces together with a little 2 or 3 strips of painter's tape so that those don't push apart during the curing process. Alright, so there we go with one half of the wing. I will go ahead and continue and finish the second half of the wing, and then when we come back we'll install our carbon spar. Okay, I've got the other wing half glued in place. I've dry fitted the carbon spar. Don't forget, when you're applying a wing to the edge, when you're applying glue to the edge of your wing to attach it to the fuselage plate, make sure that you don't get any glue in the channel for the carbon spar. Double check that before the glue sets up. Okay, so you'll have a little bit of a gap at each end of the carbon spar. Try and get those as equal as possible. Everything's fitting together nicely so far. The carbon spar, I like to take a piece of sandpaper and rub down the carbon spar with sandpaper, rough it up a little bit so that the glue holds onto it better. That'll create some carbon dust, so you want to do that outside. Wear a mask, wear some safety glasses when you do it. When you're done sanding, don't forget to take a piece of paper towel or something and wipe the carbon spar down, because it will be coated with carbon dust. And I've already done that to mine. So I've got my wax paper ready to go on top of the wing spar once I apply the glue, and I've got books setting here to add weight to keep everything nice and flat while the glue is curing. So I'm just going to go through and add glue to this channel, and remember, you're going to be pressing this down, carbon spar down into this channel, so you don't want to put in too much glue, otherwise you'll just waste it and then have to clean up the excess glue. Just make sure you get it in there, you apply it evenly. Go slow. I was going too fast, so go slow. Make sure that you have some scrap foam to use as a squeegee to clean up the excess glue. And then I'm going to take a piece of scrap foam, and I'm going to make sure that I've got this glue evenly throughout the channel. I'm just going to spread it out a little bit before I put the wing spar in there. Make sure I get some on the sides of the channel. Okay, now before the glue has time to set up, make sure we get our wing spar in there. Make sure that our gaps are about the same at each end. Okay, then take another piece of scrap foam and squeegee down any excess glue. Make sure that you press it in. Okay, that looks pretty good, and it's not messy. So now we want to take our wax paper, put it on top of the wing spar, and the wing spar is pretty critical, so I'm going to let this set and cure for quite a while. Several hours. Okay, everything's laying flat, wing spar is in. We got weight on top of it to hold everything flat. We're good to go until the next step. Okay, we've let our glue set up on our wing spar and our wings. Everything is nice and solid. Now it's time to glue on our horizontal stabilizer. Again, I've got the top facing up, so I don't have any globs of glue on the top of it. You want to make sure that your mating surfaces are nice and straight and clean, no jaggy edges, everything that mates up just as the way it should. And you want to get your slot all lined up on that. Okay, so try to not get any glue anywhere except on the mating surface. You don't want to get any glue inside that cavity where the top of the fuselage is going to slot into it. Okay. And have your painter's tape available. Okay, so we're going to mate it up. I'm going to pull it apart for about 10 seconds. Let the solvent evaporate and put it back together, making sure that my slots are lined up. Now that everything's lined up, get our painter's tape. Alright, now we just got to let that cure and then we're on to the next step. Okay, I've dry fitted my servo in and I have got the top half and bottom half of the fuselage just dry fitted in again. Make sure everything is still square, make sure everything is still flush when you press it together. Now is the time that you need to center up your aileron servo because you're going to be gluing your aileron servo in before you glue in the top half or bottom half of your fuselage. I have decided to orient mine so that the control rods and control horns are on the bottom of the wing instead of the default configuration on top of the wing. My suggestion would be, if this is the first plane that you've built, or if you've never modified a plane, a build of a plane on the fly, I would suggest you go with the default configuration and orient the servo so that it's on top. But dry fit your servo in whatever orientation you're going to put it in, and then dry fit the top and the bottom pieces, halves of the fuselage in place, because you may find that you might have to carve out some foam to give clearance to your servo. I'm using 3 9-gram servos in this build because I think I'm probably going to have to use a 3S to get the thrust to weight ratio that I want. So dry fit it in and make sure that your halves fit in nice and flush, and if you need to, carve out some of your foam. I'm not going to go over the process of centering in your servos in this video, but in the show notes I will provide a link of a video that I posted that shows how to center up your servos. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the top and bottom half of my fuselage, get my servo centered up, get it glued into place now that everything is fitting the way it should, and then we'll be back for the next step. Okay, so I have centered up my servo, and now what I am going to do is just put a little bit of hot glue underneath the tabs, and this servo fits snug enough in the foam that I think that is going to work just fine. I don't think it is going to go anywhere. Okay, so I'm going to let my hot glue cool off there a little bit, and then I'll be gluing in the bottom half of the fuselage. So we will be back. Okay, the servo's in, it's centered. It's time to go ahead and glue in the bottom half of the fuselage. And double check where we need to put the glue. Make sure you get the sides of the tabs that are going to go in. Okay, so make sure that you got everything pressed down. All right, and use a square and make sure that it's completely vertical everywhere. Adjust it if you need to. And if you don't have a square, you can always use a book, a picture frame, anything that's got a good 90-degree angle to it. All right. Make sure that you don't have any glue inside the cavities there where your servos are going to be going in. Okay, it is time to put the top of the fuselage on, and we'll just about be finished with the airframe. We'll be finished with the airframe assembly, and then all we have to worry about is getting the other servos installed, control horns, get everything hooked up, we're ready to go. It won't be long now. Before you know it, we'll be throwing it in the air. Okay. That should have it. Okay, don't forget to hook your rudder over first. You don't want to tear up your rudder getting this top part of the fuselage in. Okay, now let's get my square. I think we're square. Now I'm going to let all this set up overnight. Okay, I have my elevator and rudder servos installed. Same process that we used for installing the aileron servo. Make sure that you get them centered up before you install them. Now we need to finish up the completing the hinge on our rudder. It's not attached to the bottom half of the fuselage because it would make it impossible to get those two halves installed. So now we need to finish up the hinge on our rudder, and so what I'm going to do is put a bead of glue on here. Okay, and then we're going to press it into the bottom of that fuselage. We're going to create, basically it's a foam hinge, glue hinge, and I'm going to let that set for quite a while to cure up, and then what I'm going to do is take a piece of packing tape or painter's tape to hold that together, and then what I'm going to do after this is all finished curing is I am going to reinforce that with some packing tape on the inside and the outside of the hinge, because my control horn is going to go right back here. So all the, the pressure from the servo is going to be right on that part of that hinge. So we're going to reinforce it. Okay, so I'm putting in the control horns now on the ailerons. I've already got one in. I thought I would do one on camera. Get your control rod attached, and the control rod that I'm using, I had one length of control rod that had a Z-bend on both ends of it, so I basically just cut that in half. Attach your control rod, get your control horn set up, and see exactly how it needs to be positioned. You want to get the hinge, or the end of the control horn as close to the hinge as possible so that you have symmetrical movement. And then I just took an ink pen and marked the location. The height of the mount for the control horn is about the same thickness as the foam itself. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting a slot all the way through. I'm attaching it with hot glue. I also have my linkage stops on my control horns oriented so they're facing inside, not outside, so that it gives me as little angle on those as I can possibly get on it. So, all right, so now you're gonna need, the control horns are 2 millimeters thick and this foam is thick, so just cutting a slot at least wasn't gonna work for me. So what I am doing is I'm cutting all the way through the foam, one slot. And don't cut your finger when you're cutting through. And then right next to that, I'm cutting about 2 millimeters out of it. And then I'm using the control horn to actually push that foam out that I've already cut. So when you get that done, check the other side, make sure you don't have any foam hanging on. Get that slot all cleared out, and then dry fit your control horn to make sure it's going to go in there okay, and that one does. Okay, so now with the hot glue, I'm going to put some hot glue on the side and then those holes of the control horn. And then I'm going to fill this whole slot that I made with hot glue. And then get my control horn in there. Okay. And then on the other side, you're going to be pushing out a lot of hot glue. So you want to make sure that the end of your control horn is level with the top of the wing plate. And then just clear off the excess glue. Oh, and I guess it'd be good if I turn that around, huh? See how easy it is to make a mistake when you're doing it and trying to explain it at the same time? Okay. Alright, so now that I have more hot glue on my hands than I have on the actual control horn, alright, now I'm going to put just a little bead of hot glue right next to it, just to add a little bit of support. Alright, I think that will do it for the control horn. So don't forget to cut your slot wide enough, dry fit it before you go to glue it in. And then once that hot glue cools down, we'll go ahead and attach our control horns to it. Okay, I jumped ahead a little bit off camera, sorry about that, forgot to film it. All I did was install my linkage stops and the control rods, and I just cut off the excess. But the process that I use when I'm installing them, and you may want these facing outside instead of inside if it makes it too difficult for you to adjust them. It is a little more cumbersome to adjust those when they're facing inside instead of outside. I'll leave that up to you. But what I do is I remove the control stop from the control horn, just slide it over the rod, and then install it inside the control horn. Make sure that my servo is centered up, make sure that my control surfaces are flush, and then tighten it down. That's all there is to it. The only other thing I had to do was reverse the direction of the aileron servo because they were moving in the wrong direction. Everything's good to go now. So the ailerons are aileron linkage servo is installed. Everything is good to go so far.